Well, now, before breakfast time, we look at the weather forecast with Francis Wilson.
Good morning. Well, this day back in 33, you remember it well, there was snow all over the place, roads were blocked. Not like that today. In fact, it's going to be quite a warm week for us in the south, summer-like for many of us in the southeast of England, but there is a stripe of cloud which will get in the way for many parts of Britain. Let's see what's been going on. Overnight, this has moved up and abroad. Over here, there's a lot of rain over northern Italy and Austria. If we run this sequence through the night, you'll see that this is quite a fierce patch of weather if you're thinking or contemplating going out that way. Into us, though, it's the southeast that remains with the continental type weather, but the rest of Britain, I'm afraid, is going to be hit by this run of cloud. See through the night the cloud evaporating in the south and the nice sunny day in prospect, but further north it's lines and lines of cloud. However, things will change slowly. This rather grey, dull weather will eventually give rain into the northwest and the west of Ireland, and that rain on the cloud up here will gradually push through and away tomorrow. But in the southeast you can see a big difference. There's the edge of the cloud. So just copying that now, the first chart to have a look at. In that clear, overnight, some mist and fog has formed. So in one or two places around the Thames Valley, down to Gatwick, and in Surrey, the low mist and, well, perhaps you could even call it fog, has just lifted, and it's a grey start rather than a sunny start. But the other places, it's all strong sunshine. There's a definite edge to the cloud. It's going to break on the eastern side of the Grampians. It's going to deliver drizzle on the Western Isles and west of Ireland. By the middle of the day, it's strong sunshine, I think, sunbathing weather, summer-like, over many parts of the southeast. The rain, though, quite heavy rain with strong winds getting on board the mainland of Scotland. By 6 in the afternoon, that rain in a line down through Glasgow and Belfast, with all this area fairly crowded with cloud, but good breaks on the eastern side of the Pennines, probably quite warm there too. Then at midnight, I think the last of the rain, a deluge for South Scotland, particularly southwest Scotland, running up to Inverness, and then breaking nicely behind it, and ahead of it nice and clear. The winds today at midday are light in the south, but gales coming along with the rain by midday into the far northwest. So driving rain up there. Temperatures, well, pretty good down here compared to the cloudy, wet and windy areas. Here's the summary then of all that for today. Your local weather just coming up.
Good morning. Now a look at the weather in the southeast. A little grey to begin with, but soon it'll be sunny and warm and staying dry. Temperatures very pleasant, 20 degrees Celsius, that's 68 Fahrenheit. And today the winds are light and they're also from the south.
This is BBC1. Now at 7 o'clock, it's breakfast time with Kirsty, Wark and Mike Smartt.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Monday, the 15th of May, the day China and the Soviet Union begin their first summit in 30 years. The news headlines: President Gorbachev has arrived in Peking, but plans for his welcome had to be changed at the last minute because of the big student protests. In Argentina, the peronist candidate Carlos Menem is to be the next president. And heavy traffic jams are expected throughout London because of strikes on buses, tubes and trains. Mike Smartt joins us in breakfast time this morning. Good morning.
Morning, Kirsty. Also in this morning's programme, the students and the summit. We'll go live to our correspondent in Peking to find out what's happening there now. Why the election result in Argentina could be bad news for Britain. We'll have a report from our correspondent in Buenos Aires. At home, the stars who are trying to stop building work beginning at the Rose Theatre. And Miserable Monday. Why strikes are causing chaos for commuters in the capital. But first, the national and international news from Jill Dando.
Good morning.
Mikhail Gorbachev has arrived in China for the first Sino-Soviet summit in 30 years. But plans for the official welcome had to be changed at the last minute because of the continuing demonstration by thousands of students in Tiananmen Square. Instead, the ceremony took place at Peking Airport, where President Gorbachev was welcomed by a guard of honor. Mr. Gorbachev landed in Peking almost precisely on time at noon and stepped down to become the first Soviet leader on Chinese soil in 30 years. At the foot of the steps, he chatted briefly with his host, the Chinese President Yang Shangkung. Mr. Gorbachev's arrival ceremony should have been held 4 hours later at Tiananmen Square in the city centre, but the venue was shifted to the airport, apparently because tens of thousands of students have massed at the square to press demands for political reforms. In Argentina's presidential election, the ruling Radical Party has conceded defeat, giving victory to the Peronist candidate Carlos Menem. Although some votes are still being counted, Menem's supporters have been celebrating in the streets.
The celebration started early in the Hotel Presidente and on the avenue outside, and long before, supporters of Carlos Saúl Menem knew exactly what they'd have to celebrate. But the omens were good, and they'd been out of power too long. Votes are counted the old-fashioned way in Argentina, so it was some hours before the pattern of the results became clear. And electoral power is distributed unevenly, with more weight to the provinces where Mr. Menem is stronger and less to the capital where he's weaker. So he needed only 45% of the popular vote to win. He had that margin all along and was introduced from his province of La Rioja as the president-elect.
Bueno, gracias, Pochita.
With the call of concession and congratulation from his principal rival, Eduardo Angelos, Carlos Menem was the undisputed next president of Argentina.
Señores, señora, gracias.
Dozens of protesters, including actors, politicians and archaeologists, staged a vigil through the night at the site of the Old Rose Theatre in Southwark. Property developers want to build an office block over the remains of the Elizabethan theatre. Work was due to begin an hour ago, but the protesters say they hope it can be delayed, at least for a few hours.
Most of the protesters had managed to stay awake throughout the all-night vigil. At first light, a human chain surrounded the Rose Theatre, ready to link arms as the contractors approached. Lorries carrying sand for delivery at the site found their way barred because of the protest. The campaigners say the developers' plans to use that sand to coat the theatre remains will provide inadequate protection. The local MP, Simon Hughes, was in contact with the Heritage Minister, Virginia Bottomley, late last night.
I'm going to go in the next few minutes to speak again to the Minister, Mrs. Bottomley, and to the developers. They've both said they wanted to hear from us here this morning. I hope that's a chink of light that will lead to negotiations and an agreement not to do any action on site in the next few hours. At least the lines are open.
These demonstrators believe they are the front line in the battle to save Britain's heritage. They promise to hold that line until plans to build here are abandoned and the theatre thrown open to the public.
Commuters in London and the South East face the most serious disruption for many years because of industrial action on public transport. Very few buses and tube trains are expected to run, and southern region train services have been cut. So for most commuters, the only way to get to work is by car.
They'd been forewarned, and the rush began soon after dawn. Travellers were told to expect the worst traffic chaos since the 1970s. With bus, tube and British Rail staff taking industrial action, thousands of commuters are relying on their only alternative. A total of 45 bus garages and 345 routes have been halted by an official 24-hour strike over a pay claim. British Rail's southern region suburban services are hit by an overtime ban, and their staff face problems getting to and from work because of other transport strikes. London Underground is warning that most tube services are not expected to run. Crews are taking unofficial action in pursuit of a pay claim. For drivers who do get to work, there'll be no relief from parking restrictions. Police are advising them to use their vehicles only as a last resort and to give lifts if they can. Firms have been advised not to deliver goods during the day, and businesses have been asked to stagger their staff's working hours to try to minimise the congestion.
Backbench Conservative MPs have strongly criticised the former Prime Minister, Edward Heath, after he attacked the Prime Minister's attitude to Europe. Yesterday, he accused her of misleading the public about the nature of the European community, and he rejected Mrs. Thatcher's description of a socialist super-state.
Oh, that's rubbish. Absolute rubbish. Why? Because in Europe, we come together, 12 countries only, with 320 million population. Are we a super-state? But the United States, with 51 states, isn't a super-state. Or the Soviet Union isn't a super-state. This is abuse, an attempt to mislead the public.
The Conservative, John Carlyle, condemned the attack as disgraceful. He said it was totally out of touch with the mood of the Conservative Party. And Nicholas Winterton said it was a vicious, diabolical, unjustified personal attack on the Prime Minister. In Panama, the opponents of General Noriega are increasing their efforts to oust him in the wake of the election they say he rigged. Roman Catholic bishops have now joined the criticism. In churches yesterday, there were calls for the will of the people to be respected.
At Sunday Mass, opposition supporters chant justice, rallying around their vice-presidential candidate Guillermo Ford. The Catholic Church is putting itself in the forefront of the condemnation of General Noriega. But no amount of chanting or claims of a 3-1 opposition victory have so far moved him. A general strike is being called for Wednesday in the next attempt to topple the Noriega regime.
And that's all from the newsroom for now. Back to Kirsty.
So 3 hours ago in Peking, President Gorbachev arrived for the first Sino-Soviet summit for 30 years. His arrival marks the apparent end of the schism that dogged Sino-Soviet relations since the 60s. But Mr. Gorbachev's arrival could hardly have been more dramatic, with tens of thousands of students forcing the Chinese authorities to scrap all their original plans. Mr. Gorbachev will be in Peking for 4 days, during which time he'll meet China's senior leader, Deng Xiaoping, and make an important address to the people on Chinese television. Well, Ian Finlay reports on the healing of communism's 30-year rift.
The world's two great communist superpowers haven't been on speaking terms since Nikita Khrushchev met Mao Zedong in Peking in 1959. What frightened the West, the prospect of a united Marxist bloc stretching from the North Sea through to Southeast Asia, fell apart in 30 years of argument about the proper road to socialism. 20 years ago, fighting broke out along parts of their 4,000-mile border, the longest in the world. Since coming to power 4 years ago, Mr. Gorbachev has been trying very publicly to reduce world tension. While he's been courting the West, he's also been chasing the possibly bigger prize, that of warmer relations with China. So far, the Chinese have played hard to get. They've laid down 4 important demands before relations can return to normal, conditions which 4 years ago looked, if not unthinkable, at least improbable. These were that the Russians should leave Afghanistan, that the Soviet-backed Vietnamese should withdraw from Cambodia, that the Soviet army should cut its forces along the Sino-Soviet border, and that the Russians should reduce their troops in Mongolia. There are some 65,000 Soviet soldiers in Mongolia, and around 3/4 of them are being pulled out starting today to coincide with the Peking summit. It's thought to be the cost of maintaining this kind of military strength that's persuaded Mr. Gorbachev of the need to mend fences with his neighbours and to meet all 4 of their conditions. Mr. Gorbachev and his team left Moscow yesterday morning, stopping overnight at the Siberian city of Irkutsk. He spoke to local people and told them, "I think everything's going to be fine."
Demonstrations by students in Peking's Tiananmen Square forced a last-minute change of schedule as Mr. Gorbachev arrived. Welcoming ceremonies planned for the afternoon were held instead at the airport, from where Brian Hanrahan now reports.
It was a night for gathering forces and showing strength. And by the time it was through, the police had abandoned any thoughts of driving the students out during the hours of darkness. With the police seen off, the students offered the authorities a concession. As dawn broke, they decided to move away from the great hall of the people where Mr. Gorbachev was to be welcomed and set up their camp on the opposite edge of Tiananmen's vast square. Soon the square was on the move, block by block, as student leaders redeployed their forces like generals marshalling an army. But their aim is to mobilize public opinion in support of political reform. And this is a generation that understands the tools of a communist state. They want to work on public opinion, and they want to do it directly, without letting the state distort their message.
We think it's necessary to have our talk shown on television and let everybody in China see it. But they don't promise to do so.
The days of demonstrations have already won the students extraordinary concessions, but they'll need great stamina to keep up the pressure on the government. The university year ends in just over a month's time, and the students' power will end with it. While the students slumbered in the sunshine, preparations went on at the Great Hall of the People to receive President Gorbachev. And China's Communist Party leader, Jiao Ziyang, came to look over the square from the roof. He's on the right with the binoculars. But after his visit, the ceremonies in Tiananmen Square were cancelled, and the decision taken to greet Mr. Gorbachev formally at the airport. It had always been the Chinese intention to provide a cool but correct reception. But now they've been forced to strip it to the bare essentials. The Chinese President, Yan Shan-kyun, arrived to greet Mr. Gorbachev and guide him through the formalities. But there were only a few flower girls instead of the hundreds of dancing children that normally delight visitors. And there was only a suspicion of the military pageantry that China likes to provide. None of this will worry Mr. Gorbachev. He's happy enough to be seen to be here and repairing the 30-year-old rift between the two countries. But his hosts will grind their teeth at the embarrassment of not being able to do things their way in their country. Brian Hanrahan, BBC News, Peking.
Well, in Peking now, our Asia correspondent Brian Barron is on the line. Brian, first of all, what is the latest on the demonstration?
It's still going on. There are at least 1,000 activists camped out doing their hunger strike in the middle of the square. They're surrounded by a lot of admirers and the curious and onlookers and so forth. And a contingent of police are all around the square as well. But basically, there's still no attempt by the authorities to intervene with any sort of heavy hand, and I think that would be most unlikely.
Do the Chinese people around the country know much about what's happening in the capital?
They know a fair amount because one of the students' demands was that the demonstration which was going on throughout the weekend should be shown on the state media. It wasn't shown quite as much as the radicals would have really liked, but certainly on Peking television, on Chinese television last night, I saw part of the demonstration and one of the negotiating sessions which ended in failure shown. So, and there's also been reporting in the state newspapers. So yes, I think a fair number of people have a very good idea about this act of defiance here.
Who has most to lose because of the unrest?
There's no question that this is extremely damaging, undermining for the Communist Party hierarchy. And I suppose that principally means Deng Xiaoping himself. It really couldn't have come at a worse moment. Here they are, hosting the Russians, trying to present an image of unity, of tough negotiation, and suddenly they're rather outmaneuvered by their own radical youth. So that's really not very good news for the stalwarts, these octogenarians who run this country.
But could this mean an early retirement, as it were, for Deng Xiaoping, and perhaps a struggle after this for succession?
Even before the students were out in the square in the last 3 weeks, there were a lot of rumours and speculation about Deng Xiaoping stepping down later this year. It could be advanced, but that really is speculative. But certainly, there's bound to be some kind of reshuffle, a hunt for scapegoats eventually. Somebody's going to be blamed for all this. Probably won't be Deng Xiaoping because he is still, as it were, the imperial figure, the emperor, if you like, in all but name, but perhaps his advisors, some of those close to him, will be singled out and will be purged eventually.
But is it likely that Mikhail Gorbachev will make any reference to the unrest?
He'll probably make some kind of passing reference as a matter of guesswork, because Gerasimov, his chief spokesman, has already acknowledged the fact that the students, these dissidents, are, as he put it a couple of hours ago, stealing the headlines. But the Soviet line, just as you'd expect, is that this is an internal matter. I'd be very surprised if Mr. Gorbachev would leap out of his limousine and stride up to these students. In fact, I'm fairly sure that the communist authorities here have no intention of allowing the Soviet leader to go very near the dissidents.
And with all this surrounding the summit, can we expect any real progress at the summit?
Oh yes, I think so. I mean, look, these things are very formal events. Nearly all the groundwork has been done by individuals like the Foreign Minister Shevardnadze. So this is more symbolic than anything else. I suppose the slight disappointment...
Well, Brian Barron was cut off there in his prime, rather, but passing over to Mike now for our next story.
Just a month after the Hillsborough disaster, the official inquiry opens today in Sheffield. It's headed by Lord Justice Taylor and will take place just a few miles from the football ground where 95 Liverpool supporters were crushed to death. The inquiry's scope is likely to be the largest and most complex of its kind. Even so, it's hoped that the investigation will produce at least preliminary recommendations before the start of next season. Mark Easton has been assessing the questions to be raised by the inquiry and the mood in which it will be held.
4 weeks after the horror of Hillsborough, one Liverpool fan is still in an intensive care unit just a few miles from the ground. Many more remain seriously ill in other hospitals and specialist units, but it's an indication of the urgency the inquiry team place on their task that their work begins in an atmosphere still clouded by grief and distress. In a few hours' time here at Sheffield Town Hall, Lord Justice Taylor will begin piecing together exactly what happened at Hillsborough and trying to answer the question posed by thousands of grieving Liverpudlians, why? Only when he's satisfied on both those points will the inquiry move into its second phase, establishing what needs to be done to ensure a similar tragedy never happens again. The investigation will inevitably focus on two main areas: the effectiveness of the police procedures and the design of football grounds themselves. South Yorkshire Police have been described as a traumatised force, shattered by the enormity of the Hillsborough disaster. But although Lord Justice Taylor makes it clear no one's on trial at the inquiry, serious questions must be asked about the way they coped with the late arrival of thousands of Liverpool fans.
They need to look at the deployment of police outside the ground. This is obviously the cause of great concern because it was the crowd outside the ground that caused the trouble. Then they will also be looking at the area between the gates and the back of the terraces. Who was in control of that area? Was it left to the stewards, or should police have been controlling the crowd as it came through the gate and into the back of the terraces?
Question marks over the policing procedures may be partially answered by television pictures of the events which have been made available to the inquiry, but the bulk of the evidence will be in the form of thousands of statements from witnesses, which may also shed light on whether the design of the ground contributed to the tragedy. The West Midlands Police have been called in to collect and collate the mass of information, much of which has been phoned in on their disaster hotline. Historical evidence from other sports ground disasters will be considered. Ibrox in 1971, the Heysel tragedy where fans also died in a crush of bodies, and Bradford, which illustrated the need for effective escape routes. Some clubs, including Liverpool, have already taken down the perimeter fences designed to prevent hooliganism, convinced safety must come before crowd control. But stadium architects like Ernie Atherton, who designed the new stands at Old Trafford, warns against quick solutions.
I think there's a certain dilemma to be faced, yes, but I think the problems with pitch invasions hasn't really gone away. There was an incident on a game yesterday where there was pitch invasions, where they'd actually reduced the fences in height as a concession towards making people feel less hemmed in. But you see, that's only 3 or 4 weeks after the Hillsborough disaster, and here we are again in the old syndrome of people climbing over the fence to make a spectacle of themselves.
So what do we do then?
That's a very difficult question.
But it's a question that the inquiry team are pledged to answer at least in part before next season. But the government still apparently determined to introduce an identity card scheme at the turnstiles as a counter to hooliganism, and clubs unilaterally dismantling anti-hooliganism barriers, the balance between safety and crowd control has become a highly charged issue. For passers-by, a lone Liverpool scarf is the only visible reminder of what happened at the Leppings Lane End a month ago. But from behind these now padlocked gates, it's hoped solutions to one of society's gravest problems may yet emerge.
Mark Easton, we can go back to the summit in Peking, and Brian Barron, cut off in his prime, is back on the line and ready to speak to us now. Brian, one quick question just now. Can we expect any further unrest and further trouble later on today?
I think the demonstration will go on. That means that it could go on right through the Gorbachev visit and still continue through to next weekend. Remember, these youngsters have been without food, the hardcore of them, of 600 or 700, for at least 2 days. Their resolution, their determination may start fading, but I don't think, certainly in the next 24 hours, that they're going to give up. They think they've won a moral victory and also, to a certain extent, a significant political victory.
Can you just give us a quick potted timetable for the next hour or so while we're on the air?
Yes, Gorbachev is due at the Great Hall of the People in less than 1 hour from now. Now, it's entirely possible that the Chinese will take him through one of the very large back entrances, so they avoid any risk of him being, quote, contaminated, quote, by those dissidents who are camped out right in front of the Great Hall of the People. Then later tonight, there's a banquet by the Chinese for Gorbachev. But meanwhile, of course, this place is absolutely packed out with over 1,000 of the world's journalists, television networks and so forth. Their eyes, their attention is focused to a great extent on what's going on in Tiananmen Square, and the Chinese Communist authorities are ruefully aware of that.
Well, we'll be coming back to you during the programme if there's any further developments. Thank you for now, Brian. And Archie's here with sport.
Very good morning to you. Trophies going to Old Trafford might have a rarity quality nowadays, but it wasn't a mirage the large crowd experienced yesterday there. It was the genuine side of a cup being held aloft, but it belonged to Widnes, who completed a league and premiership double when they beat Hull 18-10. And if you're going to bring down the curtain on the season, it's as well doing it in real style.
Powerful man, that's a beautiful ball. It's to Darren Wright. He's going all the way. He'll score. There's no problem. Darren Wright's in. Oh, what a try. Hull 5 yards from the Widnes line. Windley to Pearce to Devotee. Devotee, he's going for the line. He's in. Wallen's in. It's a try. Oh, that's a bad chip. To Courier. Now then, is Courier going to go the full length of the field? He beat Pearce. Oh, yes. He's beat Fletcher as well. Oh, what an unfortunate save. An incident for Hull. Oh, fire. And there he is, popping up inside, and there he is going. He's going to score. Oh, yes, just as you said. His 100th try in the Widnes colours.
Well, that was Martin O'Fire, who, along with Jonathan Davis, the other convert from rugby union, look as if they've blazed a trail which others are finding irresistible to follow. For the most dramatic conversion yesterday was that of another Welshman who doesn't need an interpreter to understand the way money talks. Jonathan Griffiths of Llanelli, who signed for St Helens, says that he talked to Davis, who helped shape his decision to move. And I'm sure the mention of a £150,000 signing-on fee had a bearing as well. On to cricket news for octogenarians, in fact, and remember the first time Worcestershire played the Aussies? That's right, 87 years ago. They've had to wait all that time until now for the first victory over them, but they've done it, in fact, with a day to spare, a 3-wicket success, and Ian Botham was in form with the bat. His second innings, 42, a vital contribution, and a performance certainly watched by the England manager Mickey Stewart. Phil Newport, the man of the match, will also have impressed Stewart with bowling figures of 11 for 128. Essex, meanwhile, maintained their 100% record in the Refuse Assurance League, but they left it late. The very last ball of the day, in fact. Hampshire, the victims.
And that's it. He's done it. He's done it. They've won. Alan Lilly has produced the goods when it mattered. 14 not outs and has guided Essex to their 4th win in a row this season.
They really loved that. Elsewhere, there were victories for Lancashire, Middlesex, Kent and Leicestershire. And victory at last for Gordon Brand Jr. After 13 years of trying, he's finally broken his duck on the European golf circuit. He won the Belgian Open by 4 strokes. And Bob Tway has won the Memorial Golf Tournament at Muirfield Village, Ohio, in the United States. 3 birdies in his last 4 holes, giving him a 2-strokes victory over Fuzzy Zola. Laura Davis was 2 strokes off the championship in the LPGA Classic in New Jersey. She finished second behind America's Cincy Reddick. And Gabriela Sabatini has won the Italian Tennis Open for the 2nd year running. She beat Arantxa Sanchez of Spain. Kirsty, sooner than I thought.
Thanks, Archie. You will be here in an hour unless, of course, we've got Mr. Gorbachev entering the Great Hall, in which case you'll be cut off in your prime too. Francis is here with the weather now. Francis.
Nice one for us down here, but I'm afraid over Ireland and Scotland's a fair amount of cloud. You can see abroad those things, quite a lot of rain, northern Italy, Austria in particular, and elsewhere too if you're going out to southern Russia. But out in the Atlantic, the main thing for us is all this cloud. It's streaming on the prevailing southwesterly winds, a lot of cloud coming up. There's the depression centre that's driving it all. The back edge here is the significant thing of the high radiance cloud, and that'll be through during the night through Scotland. So, cloud cleared during the night, clouded over Scotland and Ireland. Rain from this band is quite heavy and yet to really take a grip on the northwest of Scotland. But now the chart looks like this. There's some odd patches of drizzle around the western fringes. There's a good cut-off to the cloud here. A bit of fog and mist that's lifted into some grey low cloud, which will burn away by 9 o'clock. So if you live down here looking out the window, it looks grey. By 9 o'clock, the sun will be through. By midday, strong sunshine down here. The rain getting on. By 6 o'clock, the rain moving down towards Glasgow and through Belfast. Good sunny periods. Individual clouds and well separated down here. Then 12 o'clock at night, the main rain over southern Scotland being dragged away, and tomorrow looks a fairly fine day. The winds today light in the south, but gale force in the shaded region at midday, so it's driving rain to add to the problems. The temperatures, well, a bit cool, I suppose, under all that cloud, wind and rain, but nice and warm down here in the southeast. And the summary of all that for today, here you are.
Coming up, over 1 billion and still rising, China's population explosion out of control. And 50 years on, evacuees relive their war-torn childhood. That's after the news, wherever you live.
From Newsroom Southeast, the main stories this morning. London commuters face chaos today because of a 24-hour strike on the bus and underground systems. Tube drivers are staging their third unofficial strike in support of a pay claim. Only the Victoria line has a limited service, and on the buses, this is the first of a series of stoppages. Parking restrictions, clamping and ticketing will not be lifted, and the AA is warning people not to drive into London if they can avoid it. A continuing overtime ban by drivers on British Rail's southern region is adding to the problems, with about 12% of trains cancelled. Some buses will run on local routes, and the Docklands Light Railway is operating its usual service. We'll have more details in a moment. Nearly 70 firemen have been tackling a blaze which has seriously damaged council offices in North London. The fire broke out at Avenue House in East End Road in Finchley early this morning. The cause is being investigated. Worried parents are to demonstrate outside a new school in Kent this morning, claiming it could become a health risk. Churchfield's primary school in Beckenham is due to open at new premises next week, but the 320-pupil school will be sited just yards away from a rubbish tip. Many parents say they'll boycott the school if the dump's not removed. Bromley Council is looking at alternative sites for the tip, but it says independent safety checks have shown there's no risk to health. And those are the headlines. Now the travel news. On the trains, about 12% of trains on Southern Region are not running. That's slightly worse than last week. On the Underground, only 4 trains on the Victoria line, no service elsewhere. And Docklands Light Railway is operating a full service. On the buses this morning, there are no buses operating in central London, but there are routes operating at Bexley, Kingston, Orpington, Sutton, Harrow, Potters Bar, Stanwell and Walthamstow. And the AA report quite a busy start on the motorways. The M25 junctions 11 to 13 clockwise, that's very busy indeed at the moment. Anti-clockwise on the same motorway between junctions 14 to 13, also very heavy. On the M1 southbound between junctions 7 to 10, also stationary. And finally, a look at the weather. It'll be a great start, but it'll be quite sunny soon and also staying dry. Temperatures 20 degrees Celsius, 68 Fahrenheit. And that's it. We're back in half an hour.
It's 7:31 now. The news summary from Joe Dando.
Good morning. Mikhail Gorbachev has arrived in China for the first Sino-Soviet summit in 30 years. But plans for the official welcome had to be changed at the last minute because of the continuing demonstration by thousands of students in Tiananmen Square. Instead, the ceremony took place at Peking Airport.
The airport arrival was meant to be brief. The formal welcome should have come later at the Great Hall of the People. But instead, China's President Yan Zhangchun was hurriedly brought to the airport to preside over the bare minimum of ceremony needed to greet a head of state. And this was no ordinary arrival. Both China and the Soviet Union have much to gain by ending their 30-year-old rift. The first payoff is a reduction of tension and forces along their enormous common border, allowing both sides to divert military money to their economy.
In Argentina, Carlos Menem of the Peronist opposition party has claimed victory in the country's presidential elections. More than 20 million Argentinians voted in the elections, which were the first under a democratic government for 37 years. Although the votes are still being counted, Menem has taken a strong lead and his supporters are already celebrating in the capital, Buenos Aires. In Panama, the opposition party has called for a one-day general strike on Wednesday in a bid to oust General Noriega. The strike will coincide with an emergency meeting of the Organization of American States in Washington. Meanwhile, the Roman Catholic Church has demanded that the military-backed government accept the opposition victory in elections 8 days ago. At home, demonstrators who kept an all-night vigil at the site of the Rose Theatre in Southwark have succeeded in delaying the start of building work, at least for a few hours. The protesters formed a human barrier across the access road to the site. Lorries bringing in sand to pack around the foundations of the Elizabethan Theatre had to turn around and leave. The local MP, Simon Hughes, is meeting the development company this morning. They hope to discuss alternative plans during what's been described as an important breathing space. Commuters in London and the South East face the most serious disruption for many years because of industrial action on public transport. The rush to get to work by car began soon after dawn. Very few buses and tube trains are expected to run, and Southern Region train services have also been cut because their staff are finding it difficult to get to work too. The tube and bus drivers are striking over a pay claim. That's all from me. I'm back at 8 o'clock. Now back to Kirsty.
Now back to China, where the country's leaders are preparing new laws to enforce China's already stringent birth control policy. Many rural couples have been ready to pay steep fines rather than obey the rule of only one child per family. They'd rather have a son to help on the farm and keep them when they're old. But the government's worried. Agriculture just can't provide enough food for a population which now exceeds 1 billion. Brian Barron again reports.
The biggest obstacle to China's efforts to drag itself into the modern competitive world isn't anything to do with politics or the latest wave of student unrest. It's the government's failure to contain China's population growth. For a decade, the Communist Party has pursued the one-child-only family planning program. Today, it's not working. Here in Peking Maternity Hospital, the number of new arrivals is alarming officials. In the whole of China last year, there were 22 million children born. That's one every 1.4 seconds. It means that by the year 2000, there'll be 100 million more Chinese than the government wanted. What has gone wrong?
It's in the countryside that problems occur. 80% of peasants and farmers have 2 or more children. That's partly because of their limited economic and educational background, and also that country folk worry about the standards of rural health care. They're afraid something might happen to an only child, so they want more than one.
The state-controlled media emphasize the financial benefits for citizens who observe the one-child-only rule. Those who disobey can face public ridicule, like this father of 9 in Hunan province. His case was featured on Chinese television news. For having 8 children too many, he lost his job as Communist Party secretary in his village, was expelled from the party and fined £1,300. That's a fortune in China. Today, communist officials are drafting new laws to bolster the one-child-only policy. The fact is, however, that family planning as a concept is already enshrined in China's constitution, and no one seems to pay much attention to that. So there's justifiable scepticism about the authorities' ability to stem the tide. By the turn of the century, the population will probably reach 1,300,000,000.
Brian Barron. Back home, and millions of London commuters faced chaos on the capital's roads this morning because of industrial action on buses, tubes and British Rail. 3 separate disputes spell unprecedented misery for the capital's 2 million commuters as they face the worst